Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just come back from Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which is the 2019 sequel to 2014's Godzilla, which is itself a remake of classic Japanese monster movie about giant nuclear-powered lizard that takes over the world.
It's the most boring, offensive, lazy film. I looked at my watch endlessly. So I had this combination of being completely bored, right, because it's such lazy storytelling, really, and such bad direction, and it ends up making you feel that all the actors in it are whores, and really all the filmmakers are whores. I mean, there's no reason for making this film, and it's badly made, and it's just it's offensive.
There'll be spoilers coming up, including one where Jose ruins the end.
Yay. So kind of basically what you have is this broken family, and the mother unleashes, all of these monsters, which they know is going to cause all this destruction and kill millions of people. So she takes it upon herself because her theory is that this will bring back some kind of balance in the world, right? And then so she destroys a million families and millions of people, and then you're expected to have feelings for her being reunited with her own family, and you just think, fuck off.
Yeah, well, the
right?
thing
It's so immoral and stupid.
The moment that I pointed out to you, which I think might be slightly animating some of this hatred, some of this offence you've taken, is the bit where they track one of the monsters, or one of the things that's about to happen, to an island off Mexico.
Yes.
I don't know if I didn't recognise the island. I don't know if it's made up, whatever. But the point is there's this choice that Vera Farmiga's character, the mother, has, which is do I awaken this thing and continue my plan to bring all these things back, and kill all these people who are currently evacuating, or do I wait? And there doesn't seem to be any downside to waiting, as far as I can tell. The film doesn't really set one up. She just goes ahead with it. And the thing is that I kind of leant over to you in the cinema and said, well, they're all Spanish or something, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
that's the film's attitude.
Yeah.
Because then later on, when the kind of climactic fight with these four monsters happens, that's in Boston. And Boston is very conspicuously empty at this point. Yes. They are destroying the Red Sox stadium and what have you, but there's not a civilian in sight dying. You know what I mean? White people don't die in this.
Yeah, well,
millions or thousands at least that you see of anonymous Mexicans do. So
the reason why I'm using the word whorish, and bear with me, because I have a whole theory about this. It's so interesting who gets represented and how in Hollywood cinema, right? Because entire races. I mean, look at the way that black people have historically been represented. Look at how the Japanese and the Chinese were represented in the 30s and 40s, kind of very racist terms. Other people were just excluded from representation altogether, right? Then the war comes in, the European market is wiped out, so all of a sudden lots of Latin Americans in 1940s, Hollywood pictures, because, they have a Lend-Lease policy, and they want to become friends with Latin America because of the war and create new markets in Latin America. So
what was the Lend-Lease policy?
Oh, maybe I'm getting it mixed up. Maybe Lend-Lease was with Europe. But anyway, there was a policy to bring kind of Latin American in contact with the United States, partly as an ally during World War II, partly to build markets in a new area that had been lost in Europe because of the war, right? So you had stars like Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles and people like that traveling all over Latin America for goodwill trips and so on.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole bunch of musicals with Carmen Miranda and you all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of Latin American stars that appear in Hollywood cinema that had not appeared in the 1930s, right?
Okay.
And then kind of in the 1950s, you have a lot of Europeans, and European settings in Hollywood cinema. Why? Because they have money that needs using in Europe, right? Yeah, so kind of this idea of representation being tied to money, right? In the 1980s, Sony buys Columbia Pictures. You have a lot of Japanese, people and settings. Lots of films begin to be set in Tokyo, and so on and so forth in the 1980s. And now you have this resurgence of China, right? You get kind of Chinese characters in a whole bunch of, films.
because the Chinese market is so important.
It's so
because
important.
they only let in a few films
That's right.
from Hollywood
so
a year.
it's only if you've got dough, right, that you get representation
Yeah.
in a particular kind of representation, right? So obviously Mexicans kind of don't matter, so you kill them all off in films, or kind of you make them villains, or Nazis during World War II, right? They get represented, but they get represented in particular ways. So, and now I think in this film what you see is precisely that. So obviously you have to have Japanese people, right? Because of the nature of Godzilla and who owns the copyright and all of that stuff. And then kind of the Mexicans don't matter. You can kill them all with impunity, right?
That's the function of Ken Watanabe and Zhang Ziyi in this.
Yeah.
Who I think she's Chinese, but the film doesn't really make a distinction. It says, well, she's from that region, so she'll take up that part of the film. And they're the ones who talk about the history of the monsters and the ancient lore and blah blah blah. And Ken Watanabe is the one who is talking about the connection that we should have, and he's the one who sacrifices himself and makes a physical connection with Godzilla just before essentially committing suicide to bring Godzilla back with the nuke.
This is like a grotesque film. I mean, so obviously, the original Godzilla was always read in relation, to
Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
The nuclear bomb and the effects of the nuclear bomb. And this one, in some sense, I suppose, has a kind of
it tries to talk about the human effects on the globe.
Yeah.
Human caused climate change, but it turns that into sort of
let's destroy everything.
Yeah, so the film is it's not coherent in this sense, but it overall it's generally building on the idea that we are the problem and we need to fix things. But this film does, it says these titans, these giant monsters, of which you see 4 kind of clearly, and then you see a few others on TV screens and stuff. They are kind of guardians of the Earth, and they are part of the Earth's kind of destruction and regeneration cycles and blah blah blah. And Vera Farmiga's story is we need to let them do their thing and destroy and regenerate. Because you see that in their wake, she says, the kind of the radiation that they leave behind brings new life and blah blah blah. So it's very stupid. I actually say it is poor storytelling, but that's the idea. It's trying to it's trying to relate what it's doing to modern global concerns.
I know it's trying to do that, but it's just dumb.
Yes.
Right, and it's got terrible dialogue. You don't care what happens and to who, and I mean the only good bits, and they are good, is the monsters themselves. I love the way they looked. I love the way they moved. I'm
glad you said that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So and I said to you at one point, you said there was one funny line of dialogue that you liked. You said best bit of the film so far. As a way of saying the whole thing's been crap. And I said, well, actually, I think the best thing so far has been the lighting. And you kind of laughed, but I really meant it. I love the way the lighting works. And actually, in particular, what I really like is how clear things are to see at night, which I think is really rare. And it's partly helped by the fact you're doing this with CGI, so you can kind of light things how you like. But even then, I think it's kind of rare. And this is done with the use of volumetric lighting and kind of smoke and dust to give things kind of halos and things. Bioluminescence in the creatures themselves. Especially when things are raining and you get light kind of bouncing off the skin, reflecting off. Everything is really clear to see, and I think that's worth remarking upon because it is. Some of the shots in this are remarkably beautiful.
They are, but to so little effect.
Yeah.
So actually, kudos to the designers, right, and the cinematographers and the lighting people and the CGI people because, the monsters look terrific, and some of the shots are, like you say, beautiful. They're genius.
Beautifully composed. There's a repeated type of shot, which is a very small person, kind of very far away from the camera, and then even further away from them, a giant beast filling the screen as it kind of unfurls its wings and they light up.
Mind you, I think, so those spectacular shots that are mostly CGI are often very beautiful and kind of poetic. Everything to do with people is chaotic and senseless, and you have... The compositions are terrible and purposeless.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just terrible. And actually, something with such great special effects and, like you say, lighting and the monsters are terrific, and particularly when they're fighting each other, it has some terrific moments. But I looked at my watch, I don't know how often. It was just deadly dull.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to say that it's to no effect. I think it's a really good point, because I was admiring the way that these shots looked, and I was admiring sort of the design of the creatures. I think there is a singular look to them. Like, you can identify, this doesn't look like just any other monster movie.
Yeah.
You can tell a frame of this film from a frame of another.
Yes.
You know, it's the way that there's this kind of realistic rendering to the kind of skin, whatever, of the creatures. And there's a kind of quote-unquote realistic design to their shapes and things. Like, you can kind of imagine how such a creature might actually exist. They're not just cartoons.
I mean, one looks like an eagle, the other one looks like a moth or a butterfly, you know.
Yeah, one looks like a giant chameleon lizard dinosaur thing. That's Godzilla.
So,
but then there are these elements of flair to them, like the way that Godzilla's plates up his back light up as he like charges up a sort of, you know, bolt of energy to blast whatever. You know, there are these elements of flair and kind of nonsense, but I think they combine really well.
They do. But I think there's a real issue here, actually, because, you know, it just goes to show that all the millions that must have been spent, and you can imagine all the amounts of meetings on the designs of the monsters, and you can actually also imagine the storyboarding, right, around particular images, because, you know, some of them are really beautiful. The one with the three-headed Hydra dinosaur, and then with all the lighting, kind of, you know,
you get flashes like lightning that just illuminates certain bits.
It's an amazing shot, but who the fuck cares? When, you know, the rest of the writing, like, you don't care who dies, who lives, you don't know where they're headed to, where they're headed from, what, you know, what's at stake is so badly conceptualized, right? And also, it's done within, like, this narrative of a divorced couple who've already lost a child and have a daughter, right? And, you know, kind of, and there's nothing at stake emotionally for the audience in any of that. So there's the assumption that the audience will care, right? And actually, the audience isn't just going to care, you know, because the family is divorced, right? Like,
it's almost
so
as though, like, there are things that are so bad in it that you almost feel that it's deliberate, in the way that a really bad movie can be enjoyable, in that way that people like to say. I mean, you and I together were mocking the film out loud, not like to ruin it for other people, but, you know, to each other during the film, just kind of whispering to each other, making jokes about various things or comments on various stupid things that were happening, and that was entertaining for us, right? And I'm not saying that's deliberate. That's definitely not deliberate, but you almost feel like it is, because the film is basically a litany of people doing stupid things and making stupid decisions, and in a way it has to be. That's how these films operate. People don't obey the rules, or they behave rashly, and then it's supposed to be a lesson about how humans should be smarter. But you get to the point towards the end where they need to fix this device that allows them to communicate with the creatures, and they're doing it in the pouring rain, and they've got a soldering iron out, and you're going, this is in the middle of a war zone. It's just absolutely stupid. They're trying to operate on electronics in pouring rain. There's no way that the people working on this movie weren't aware of how dumb that was. Do you know what I mean? But they just did it anyway.
But I think it's worse than that, because, you see, there was no tension generated at all. So, you know, whilst they were doing that, there was a certainty, like, you know, you were told with confidence from her look and his look that this is not a problem to fix. They will do it. Right? I mean, the least you could have done is, will they finish on time? Will they do it as the monster approaching?
Exactly.
Nothing. Right? It's just stupid.
Yes.
Right? Like,
it's very, very stupid. And it has that Game of Thrones problem that, like, when you got to the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, as we were saying in the podcast on that, how the world kind of shrank. The idea that this world was supposed to be huge no longer mattered anymore. And in this, it's like, they're in Antarctica. Let's go to Antarctica. Here we are.
Yes.
Let's go to Mexico. Here we are.
Yeah.
You know, they just jump around the world. You don't really know where anyone is or how they are in relation to each other. People's motivations are stupid and vague, and they're not that vague, but they're just dumb, and you don't really.
But
get
listen, you know, like in Star Wars, for example, you jump from one galaxy to another, right? But you're also given a sense that, you know, you need to move from A to Z in order to get to the ship on time to, you know, kind of blast off or something. Yeah, and actually getting from here to there, you get a sense of, this is the distance. Will they do it? Won't they do it? Will they make it? Right? There's nothing like that here at all.
No.
I mean, you know, there's that whole scene where they go up the elevators. And, okay, what's at stake? Will they make it? What happens if they go up? You know, he decides to go down. You know, things are kind of falling all over. you don't have a sense of what they need to do or how much time they have left to get up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's filmmaking of the worst kind, really.
Yeah. The only thing that's clear in that sense is the scene. There are a couple of things where you've got the Vera Farmiga deciding whether to blow up a bit of Mexico or not is one. There's no tension there, but what's at stake is clear. And there's the thing about Ken Watanabe sacrificing himself to resurrect Godzilla. That again is clear, and I think that's probably the best scene in the film for that reason. I think it works well.
I thought it was banal in the extreme. I mean, I know that it was set up so that you would feel certain things, but actually you don't, or I didn't.
No, I didn't really feel, but I got what was going on. I I'd sympathise and
this is like crumbs. You were beginning to be grateful because actually we understood what was at stake, because the rest of the film has nothing at stake for anybody. And really, as beautiful as the monsters are, and we talked about some of those shots, it's not worth going to the movies for. It's like, I think it's the worst film I've seen in a long time.
I mean, you get when the film comes out on Blu-ray and Ultra HD and what have you, some screenshots from it will make beautiful desktop backgrounds.
Yes,
be fantastic to look at. But that's the value in the film.
This is a film that if it appears on broadcast television and it's playing, I'd switch the channel.
Yeah.
So, forget about it.
Do you remember the previous one, the 2014 one?
Vaguely, yes.
Because part of the criticism of that was nothing happened, really. They spent a long time... there's this thing in cinema... It's one of these things that people like to say about cinema without really thinking that, it's better if you don't see the monsters, but the more you wait and stuff, the tension builds. It's the Jaws theory, because Jaws... The monster looked rubbish, so they hid it for a long time, and it was like, they build the tension. Without realising that it's not just hiding the monster that does that, it's making a good film that builds it up that does that. Godzilla had that problem where... obviously they could have shown it as much as they liked. They had a big budget and they could have, but they waited and waited and waited, and then showed you a glimpse of a foot after about 45 minutes. And
I vaguely remember that.
Whereas this film, straight in, they went, forget all that. This time, monsters all the way through, all the time.
Yeah, but
and the effect is even worse.
I mean, monsters in themselves are neither an attraction nor a distraction. I mean, everything revolves around the story. Right, and and what the story sets out to do, and how it's set up, and the world that it builds, and the relationships, and the people that it kind of puts in them, So this has nothing except, monsters, right? So it's a complete waste of everybody's time, and actually, I think really offensive. It fits, to me, it fits into this pattern, of a kind of a barbarism of American culture, where there's no regard for people or indeed property, right? So that, you can just destroy entire cities and planets and worlds, and then somehow you're expected to care for a few people without being given any reason to do so, right? It's not like that the people who remain will be the carriers of the seeds for mankind's future. Nothing, you're just expected to care for them because they're the protagonists of the story, and you just don't. It's really lazy, offensive filmmaking with a view of the world that is authoritarian in the extreme, right? I mean, this Vera Farmiga character, did the filmmakers not understand that it's morally reprehensible for someone to take it upon themselves to kind of kill millions of people, just to live out a theory that they have? I mean, that is Nazism at its worst. That view of the world. I mean, it's completely self-reflexive. They have never given this kind of thing a thought, that there's something wrong with that, or with people who think that way.
Yeah, because the film ends up not having anything to say about that in particular. It kind of brings the family back together. But as to her theory on, this is what the world needs, the film doesn't have any. The film doesn't say, no, actually, she might have been wrong about this. No. Maybe she needs to blah blah blah, change her opinion. Actually, the film really convinces you that most of these people need to fucking die because they're so annoying and horrible. And I really want to see the monsters destroy them all.
I really wanted to see her die, and I, but actually, the film, even as the film does kill her off at the end, spoilers, but even as it does so, it's expecting you to have sympathy for someone who's just killed dozens of millions of people.
Yeah.
Like, it's just... Who are these people who make a film without thinking about these things?
Americans. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they were Spanish or something. That's the moral.
But even that's not true, because Boston in the film gets destroyed.
Yeah, but like I said, Boston is conspicuously empty. It fits very well into that pattern. Well, it fits and then exacerbates that pattern I've been talking about how films were destroying cities en masse and people getting hurt, and then people in the real world started to notice and went, what's the human cost going on in these films? Like, what's going on? So then films would start to say, we've cleared a city, now we can destroy it.
Yes.
And they don't do that. I don't think they say Boston has been evacuated, but Boston is not full of people in this.
Yeah.
By the time they get there, it is empty.
Yeah.
But then the thing that then exacerbates the thing is that thing about the island off Mexico, where you see it's full of people and they make a very deliberate decision to destroy it while everyone is trying to evacuate.
Yeah. Anyway, disgusting film, disgusting and dull.
But very pretty. So wait for the screenshot. Get some nice screenshots because it looks some lovely CGI bits. Nice bits of visual design, but just...
I'd be happy never to see it again.
Well, you don't have to.
I won't.
Because we live in a free country. It'll make its money. It's cost up to $200 million to make, and it's made $180 million so far. It'll make good money. I mean, the first one, despite the fact it got a bit of a damp reception critically, cost 160 million and made 530.
So it made its money.
So it made its money, and I suppose in a sense, I was surprised that they made a sequel at all because the first one went down so terribly. But I mean, you look at the money, and Godzilla is a property that's been making money for 50 years.
Yes, people love the Godzilla films, but let me tell you, this is
a bad one.
This is really bad and really offensive. It's a morally an offensive film.
Mm. Speaking as a white guy, I didn't mind.
Anyway, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on...
we're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.